the most effective way for to win large dollar contracts, and when I talk about that and what I'm kind of driving into today, is thinking about $10 million and up, right? I play in that world where the pipeline opportunities that my customers are going after are 10 to like $250 million opportunities. They're big opportunities. And these are opportunities that you're not going to go and just get as a direct award or something and come out. You have to work at it. And so the most effective way to win those large contracts is to help customers acknowledge their dissatisfaction with their current situation and then for them to recognize a need for change. This is what the very best salespeople do. It's the best business developers, the best capture managers. It's what they do. They guide their customers along the journey, helping them think about what bothers them and then defining that ideal state that they'd like to be in, the ideal state that your product or your services can deliver, right? And so when you think about this and you wonder, how can you do that? At the very core of successful sales is being able to get the customers to talk about their pain points, their challenges, right? And their goals. It's not enough to just meet with a customer and have great meetings. You need to have the right discussions. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So if you struggle to find and build relationships, if you struggle to identify and shape opportunities in the federal market, then in this training, I'm going to teach you the right questions to ask federal buyers in order to move these relationships and these opportunities forward. Having the right discussions will help you start having more successful meetings, more successful opportunities in your pipeline. So do me a favor, in the chat, put right discussions in the chat if that's what you want. If you want to have more of these right discussions, put that in the chat because that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I want to welcome you to the daily live federal sales training where I talk about tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as an IT small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, through the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. Before we get started, do me a favor. Part of the process is communicating with each other. In the chat, help buyers remember who you are. Help others remember who you are. Put your company name in there. Put your core competency in there. Use 2 or 3 words to describe what your company does and make it easy for us to remember who you are. I want to remember who you are so that if I hear somebody mention something that's along the lines of your core competency, I go, oh, I know Sally over here. Let me make the introduction. I do that almost every single day. And in particular in our workshops where I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, oh, you need to go talk to this person because the both of you can grow from knowing each other. And so I want to be able to know who you are and what you do. And I want others to be able to know easily what your company does. If you're in Facebook or YouTube, I highly encourage you to come into LinkedIn and connect with me personally, connect with others in the community. Pretty much everybody in these trainings in this community are open to connections. And so come on over here. You can still use those other social media platforms, but in here, you really begin to build relationships with the people that you see in the training. And then the last thing is, if you're open to connections, like I'm saying, just put that in the chat right now. Just say, I'm open to connections and let people know. One of the things I'm thinking about doing, and maybe you guys can let me know if you like this idea, but I saw somebody do this and I was going to mimic it where they just had a spreadsheet basically of all of you who are in this training who are open to connections. I just have it like a running list, and here's the LinkedIn, the URL to your LinkedIn profile, so that if somebody new comes in, we go, hey, all these people are open to connection with others in the GovCon world. And so I thought I'd just like create this list that grows 100, 500 people who are open to connections. So if that makes sense and you understand what I'm saying, put something in chat that just lets me know you're interested in that. I'll look at chat later on that. Okay, so we're going to dive through a lot. I think, as you can tell, a couple of things going on. One is I'm running on a little bit higher adrenaline today. And then the other is I speak in these trainings typically at a fire hose pace, meaning I'm going to give you a fire hose worth of water and you'll be able to take sips out. But my goal is you get solid nuggets of wisdom and tactical advice that you can take going forward. So I'm going to walk you through what I consider the 4 best sales questions to ask federal buyers. And I will tell you, I'm a student of sales. I've been doing sales 30 years in many different ways. So business to consumer, business to business, business to government. I've done it at the transactional level, down at the $100, $200 level, and I've done it at the $1 billion level, right? So I've been doing this and studying this forever, and I never think I'm done studying. You always keep coming back. But one of my favorite teachers of sales methodologies is a guy named Neil Rackman. and he has a book called Spin Selling. And I'm going to be talking about this one in a minute. Hopefully, I can't even see my screen. There you go. Good. Hopefully, that'll make sense to you in there. But when I talk about the 4 best sales questions, they come along from him, and I'll explain it more in a minute. But one of the things I want you to keep in mind is the customer decision-making process. I'm going to talk to you about questions you can ask, and it's important to know what questions to ask, how to ask them, but also when and where in the life cycle do you ask. And so I want to pause before I go into the questions and say, and talk to you about the customer decision-making process. And this is a general question, customer, right? So I'm thinking about any large ticket sales customer where you're looking at $1 million, $10 million, $100 million opportunity. They go through a similar type process that you might be very familiar with, because even at a smaller level for a house or a car or something like that, you might go through a similar process for decision making. But I want you to think about the federal acquisition lifecycle as I go along with it, because the federal acquisition lifecycle, it goes from idea to award, basically, and that's a very formal process. What I'm going to talk to you about is more of a sales focused way of looking at it. A contracting officer would have a hard time looking at what I'm saying and see it, because they only see the steps of a process that the FAR has defined or whatever. But from a sales perspective, the customer decision-making process is made up of 6 steps. So it begins with, it could actually begin anywhere on these, but let's just say for today, it begins with the recognition of needs. And I'm going to go in and explore how do you uncover those needs, right? But the idea is it begins with the recognition of needs. Once you get a customer to understand that they have problems, pain points, they have needs, then they go into this evaluation of options phase. And I'm going to come back in a second and align it to the federal. But they begin to evaluate options. It's like, okay, I recognize I got needs. What are the options I have available in front of me? As you move forward through that phase, and the buyer is moving through that phase, they begin to have resolution of concerns. And concerns might be, maybe I can't afford it. Is it really going to be the right solution for me? They recognize that they've got the need. They're exploring these options, and now they've got objections or concerns. And so they're resolving their concerns about those. In the federal space, it tends to be a little bit more along the lines of risk. For example, should we go large? Should we go small? Things like that. And then the 4th step in this process of the decision-making process is where they actually make the decision. So they did recognition of needs, evaluation of the options, resolution of concerns, and then decision. This 5th step is implementation. So decision is that award. Implementation is execution in the federal market. And then what happens is there's these changes over time. And so as they have, let's say, a 5-year contract and they're moving through it, they see different things. They have new goals. They have new challenges. They have stuff they wish was in the last contract, but it's not in there. And their hands are tied because the government just does that, ties their own hands. But there's these changes over time, which is leading to step 1 again, recognition of needs. And in business development in particular, and capture for an opportunity, you want to be in there at that point of changes that are happening and getting them to recognize the needs. That's really one of the biggest worlds that we play in. That's the whole reason we're asking questions. And that's what I want to do today, is talk to you about the questions you would ask to explore the recognition of needs step of the process for decision making, and then also explore through those changes over time, explore those because they'll lead to a lot of need that you can uncover. So that's the decision-making process. One thing I want you to keep in mind, though, is I'm going to talk to you about questions. And sometimes it can seem overwhelming if you try to see, hey, how do I become this great big salesperson or something? A great salesperson is just a person who can listen. They have conversations with the customer and they listen. And so you come in prepared to ask certain questions that will drive the conversation in a certain way that the customer can start talking. And so I want you to remember to use a call plan. I have a call plan template. If you want a copy of that, I can get it to you free. But it's a call plan template that I use with all my customers in the workshop that says, look, from a high level, here's the objective and the purpose of the meeting. But in there at the bottom are 5 to 10 questions that I know I'm going to ask in a meeting. And so you don't have to think of every single question out there. You don't have to know everything. You have to do a little preparation, write some questions down, have the meeting, think about what your customer just said to you, come up with some new questions, right? It's just a cycle. And the beauty of the federal space is the sales cycle is 6 to 24 months. So you have time to do the right preparation to have a call plan completed with questions. So if you want to copy that call plan, put it into the chat. If you think call plans are a great idea, say call plans are great. And I'm going to move into the 4 questions, try to dive through these pretty fast. I have a whole nother set of training I have business development course, capture courses, but when I teach these I'm going to teach in the next 15 minutes what I have a couple of courses on that take an hour to dive into. So there's a lot more that goes into it. But the first question that you want to be thinking about asking when it relates to an opportunity or early business development are what we call situation questions. And remember, I talked about Neil Rackman's spin. So S is for situation questions. And this is where you're gathering just data and background information. You're gathering facts about flat out about the customer. For example, information related to the agency or the opportunity. It could be questions that relate to how many employees or users do you have? If you're in construction, like how big is the facility? And the idea is you're trying to drive at the early stages of dissatisfaction. Some of it is just pure data where you're trying to get facts. Are you on Oracle? Are you on Microsoft? And then as you're getting into the background and understanding that customer, you're trying to develop what I call as implied needs. There's implied needs and explicit needs. Implied needs is my shoulder hurts, but I'm fine. Explicit needs is it's killing me. I need to get to the doctor right now. And so then I'll schedule an appointment. You're trying to get them to schedule an appointment with you, the doctor type thing. And so you need to be able to help them understand these implied needs, but it comes from asking some basic situational questions about what's going on, who are you working with? And then the other reason you want to ask situation questions is they help you qualify. When I talk to people about a pipeline and you're putting out an opportunity in the pipeline and moving it down the sales life cycle, you qualify it at different stages, right? And sometimes people make it overly complex on qualifying an opportunity, bid, no bid, like it's a big deal. It's not. If you create criteria that is specific on why it would move forward each step, for small businesses under $50 million, this should be a very easy activity. But part of it is you want to be able to create in your capture criteria for going from one phase to the next, the right criteria that you need to know to make that decision, because those lead to the questions. And so an example of a criteria is this an active opportunity? Has the funding been approved, right? Has it actually been allocated in here? Have these people been defined? At what stage in the sales or the acquisition life cycle is it? And so these qualifying questions help you move an opportunity through the pipeline. Situation questions help you learn the answers to those qualifying questions, right? And that's a really important part of that. So I don't want to dwell too long on the situational questions, but just remember they're about gathering data and facts. And so if you understand situation questions are about uncovering that information, the facts about their current state, not their problems, but their current state. Do me a favor, put situation questions into the chat, that you're tracking that the first type of questions you ask are situation questions. I'm going to move on to problem questions, but before I do, I want you to understand there are 4 types: situation, problem, implication, and need payoff. And I'll talk about all 4 of them. But the idea of these 4 questions is not, they don't go sequentially, right? You don't ask these and then these and then these. You can bounce around. Like if you get a problem question, well, you might want to go back and explore some factual information that relate to that problem. And same thing as you go along, sales is about having the conversation and moving your like if you learn about a problem, explore that problem as thoroughly as you can, and then go, okay, let's come back. I wanted to ask you about a different area, if that makes sense. And so I'm just saying it's not linear. It's bouncing around where you and the customer take the dialogue. Okay, so I said the second set of questions is problems. Remember spin. So problem questions really uncover that pain point and challenges. They're digging into the problem. Remember, I told you my shoulder hurts. I'm trying to get them to recognize that the shoulder hurts, and it actually hurts pretty bad, right? And so customers don't buy if they don't think they have a problem. And so you need to get them to admit that problem. And by the way, this is really important in federal sales, right? It's not just with vacuum cleaner sales where I need you to admit that your carpet is dirty and you need something to clean it, right? In federal sales, even if they have an opportunity that's in the forecast or you see an RFI, have they fully thought out what their problems are? why are they getting cybersecurity services? Why are they needing the elevator to be replaced or serviced or something? Exploring the problems that are in there. The problems could be related to like elevator physical or the cost to run that elevator. And so the idea of problem questions is you're trying to dig into that. You want to be indirect is what I say when asking these type of questions, compared to being like a detective or a prosecutor where you're like, tell me where you were yesterday at 3 p.m. It's like, wow. You want to be curious. You're having a conversation with this other person. You're writing the questions down in a call plan as a way to remind yourself, but you're really just trying to be curious. And then the reason these questions are so vital is because the RFP, when it drops, the PWS, that kind of paper that comes out from the government, is only going to have so much information. But in business development and capture, we're really exploring those problems and the challenges they face and the things they wouldn't put down on paper or hadn't thought to put down on paper. But if you ask a question in the right way, if you let a conversation flow where you're listening twice as much as you're talking, then you'll get a lot of vital information that can be used in an RFI or an RFP response. Your proposal team will love you for it, being able to bring more insight about the customer. I want to give you a couple examples of problem questions really quick. Hold on one second. Situation questions, I think they're pretty straightforward, right? How big is your building? But problem questions, here's an example, and I'll go through a couple of different people. A small business specialist, you might ask him a question like, and let me just make sure I'm the right one. No, I'm not, sorry. You might ask them, what concerns do the program offices have with smalls, right? I'm trying to uncover, is there a bias against small businesses? Do they think smalls can't do it? If they don't think smalls can do it, I can't just whine about it and say, yes. I need to sit there and say, hey, sometimes people think smalls can't do it, but actually we have this past performance, we have this past performance, plus we have this other company on our team, and they've got a lot of experience. I'm trying to address the problem from a small business standpoint, small business specialist standpoint. If I'm talking to a program office, I might talk to them about, what's your top concerns expressed by your users. So if I'm thinking about an IT department and I'm thinking about, let's say, SharePoint, it's one thing for them to run SharePoint in PEO Digital, but it's another thing for all the Navy users out there. What are the top concerns you're hearing? An example of a top concern I might expect to hear back is they feel like they can't get any of their own business tools built because we're so busy migrating the whole Navy over onto Flank Speed or whatever Navy's SharePoint is called, right? Well, if I hear that, I can begin to evolve the conversation to the point where I'm like, we can do rapid development. And maybe that's something we can help you with. And another example is with a contracting officer. If I'm talking with a contracting officer and I'm trying to shape the conversation around problems, I'm trying to uncover problems, I might ask about, are you happy with the quality of the small business responses? So when you get responses to an RFI or to an RFP, how do you feel about that? Are we doing a good job with it? What's one thing you wish smalls would stop doing, right? I might ask the contracting officer that because the insight I can gain for them, not only are they sharing the answer, but they're communicating a problem, even if they don't say the problem straight out. If you're telling me what you wish people would not do, you're saying there's a problem because people are doing it, if that makes sense. Okay, so cruising along, that was problem questions. Next one is implication questions. So you got situation questions, problem questions, now implication questions. Implication questions explore the consequence of problems. And so in here, what we're talking about is I got him to acknowledge a problem. Now I need it to be a bigger problem. I've got an example that I use, and I learned it 20 plus years ago in sales. But the idea of a pain that the customer has is you want to stir that pain up so they see how explicit it is, how big a pain it is, because only then will they sit there and stop caring about money and start caring about the solution. I always say in sales, if they're talking about the money, you haven't proved the value. Right. And I've experienced that in my career too. I'm like, oh, they're asking me all about price. I didn't clearly communicate the value to them. And so one of the first things I want to pay attention to, and you want to pay attention to in implication questions, are you helping them you're helping them feel that pain. No pain, no gain. And gain in this case is a sale. You want to link the pain to other problems. And so what I like to say is, or an example I like to use is if a IT department is having problems with cyber attacks, they have a problem and they're like, we've got all these vulnerabilities and all these threats. Their IT department is thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their servers are down, the servers being hit. etc. What I want them to do is to expand that problem and go, now, those vulnerabilities that you have, or when we get hit by a malware or whatever, who else is impacted? If you're down, for example, yesterday, the day before, Microsoft was down, it impacted the world, right? It's not just Microsoft's IT team. It's not Azure and that cloud being down. It impacts them, but it impacted my company. It impacted my company and my customer because we couldn't meet on Teams or something. It impacted them because they were trying to prep for a meeting with a customer. They impacted the customer because they couldn't get a mission needed business application or something, right? You're trying to get the customer, the person you're talking to see the broader implication, consequence of the problems they define. And you don't need to do it as exaggerated as I just did, but you're having this conversation to get them to go, oh yeah, actually, if we can solve this problem, we're solving their problem too. And that's a really important thing to get done, because we're not able to accomplish the mission, but we're not able to get access to our servers or whatever. So you're trying to turn problems that you discovered in the problem phase of asking questions from implied, I got a pain, yeah, it's all right, to explicit, man, this thing hurts and I need it fixed now. Explicit basically means that they're explicitly stating and recognizing the problem, and they recognize they need to solve it or do something about it, right? So you're transforming it. If you understand what I'm talking about with implication questions and how they're about expanding the pain and really raising the perception that they need, go ahead and put implication questions into the chat. Implication questions in the chat. And I want to give you just a couple of quick examples of implication. So in no particular order, remember, I'm trying to shove this into a small amount, but how engaged, so this is for a small business specialist. How engaged is leadership in communicating with small business value? The reason I'm asking this is if I'm trying to get them to switch an opportunity from full and open to small, or the small set aside down to HubZone or something, I'm trying to get them to think about it, but I'm also trying to get them to think about, well, how would leadership think about what we're talking about? And a great example, in an hour, you'll see me post on LinkedIn. The Department of Defense just put out, past couple of days, the small business strategy for 2023. And it's Secretary Austin's commitment of the DoD to work more with small businesses. And so I'm trying to get them to think that not only if they can push this opportunity small, they'd also be addressing what his concern is, increasing the DIB of small business suppliers, so they have diversity of suppliers, and they don't worry about some of the problems they have there. If I think about the program office, I might say, and I've alluded to this before, but how do you handle backlogs without enough SMEs? And so an example is, if I know that they don't have enough subject matter experts, the government, for example, doesn't have enough cyber experts because cyber just keeps changing. There's so much in there. Well, how do you handle all that backlog? Well, we don't handle that backlog. Well, if you don't handle that backlog, well, who else is being impacted? Well, those programs can't get their ATOs, and so they can't be approved to operate, and they can only be approved temporarily for so long before they're shut down or whatever, right? You're trying to expand that concern all the way out through the implication questions. And last one, contracting officers, I might say something like, if small businesses address that main concern that you have, could it be set aside? I'm trying to get them to see this change of industry recognizing the biggest concerns the contracting officers might have by asking them questions like that. Okay, so let me go really quick on the last one. Is just, and I'm not going to dig too far into this last one at the moment, but the last one's called Need-Payoff. You've done situation, problem, implication questions. The idea of need-payoff questions is now you're exploring the value of solving the customer's problem. If we help you solve that, what would it do? You're not saying, hey, we can solve that. That's what you say in a proposal. But you're saying, well, if we can help you solve these cyber attacks and just get rid of them, so never are you threatened by cyber or something. If we can help you do that, what would happen? I want them to see the solution now, not the problem. First, I'm trying to get you to see the problem. But if I can help you solve that problem, could you play tennis again? Could you do jumping jacks and whatever else you do with the shoulder, right? I want them to begin to think about differentiators now through these need-payoff questions as I'm tightening the solution thinking in their mind to what we do best. And so here I'm trying to describe the various strengths of my company. And as I do that, I do it through questions about, well, what if this could happen because we do this really well? And the idea is doing this is allowing me to start shaping that win theme for proposals, because I'm saying, hey, if we do this, we're hitting the hot buttons. So the need payoff questions are really about exploring those the problems and showing them that you can solve it. We're getting them to start thinking about the solution. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of wrap up here and say, in this training, we talked about spin questions, situation questions that gather data and background facts, problem questions, they uncover pain and challenges, implication questions explore the consequences of the problem, and then need payoff questions explore the value of solving that problem. And so here's my tip for you. I always try to say, do something. Here's what I want you to do. Stop doing capability briefings. You're talking about yourself and not about them. The next time you go in with a customer, brief them on your company for 5 minutes, 10 at the most, only if you have a whole hour, 5 or 10 minutes at the most, and then spend the rest of the time having a discussion. Hey, let me know if you found the training valuable. Throw a thanks into the chat. We always appreciate that. If you'd like to be part of our BD Accelerator Workshop, we got that starting up in February. Send me a message in LinkedIn. This is for companies that are doing about $1 million plus, and they've got stability. The next time we'll open it is in June. Remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is having a great weekend. I hope you do. I'll see you next time.